we are eternal spiritual beings that are going to shed this identity and body when we move on to our next phase in life, our next journey after our physical death here on earth. And that more important than whatever legacy we create for this, which is ultimately transient, is the growth of our soul. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of ShiShi Meditations. And in this video, I want to talk about a poll that I recently did on my Instagram story that I'm very excited to share the results with. And the poll was, I just asked my followers, do you care more about your growth or your legacy? And I was kind of expecting for a lot of people to choose the legacy component. And if I honestly audit myself, a lot of the actions that I take are more about creating a legacy. Things like trying to get out as much music as possible into the world, trying to, even create these videos to a certain degree is motivated by, well, then I can look back and say, look at all this content that I put out. Obviously, a lot of this is motivated by growth, especially this 70-day challenge I'm doing right now, where I'm making a video a day for 70 days, sometimes 2 on a day if I can't make one for another day, like what I'm doing right now. It's the second video I made today. That's more about growth, because I know that not all of these are going to be amazing videos in terms of the quality of content necessarily, but it's just a practice for me to get better on camera and to be better at synthesizing my thoughts in a concise and powerful way to you guys. And similarly with music, I've been through growth periods, but the result that I got on my poll was that most people actually chose growth over legacy. They said that they cared more about their growth as a human being than whatever legacy they left behind. And this is a really startling and also very insightful and exciting result for me, because I actually read a book in a couple years ago called The Denial of Death. And it won the Pulitzer Prize for psychology literature. I don't know exactly what the category was. Pulitzer Prize is always for literature. So it was for psychology. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It was written in like 1974. Author's name is escaping me right now, but it's an amazing book about how basically almost everything that humans do is driven by a desire to somehow beat our own mortality, somehow preserve our name and become immortal in some way, whether it's the most basic desire to reproduce and have children to carry on our legacy and our name and our genes, or all the great works of art, all the great buildings, all the wars that have been fought. It's just all comes down to this desire to basically preserve our own name and create some sort of salve of immortality. And it all comes from this fundamental denial of death. And I remember when I was reading that, I was like, that is pretty accurate. I feel like that's kind of why I'm so into music in some ways. Obviously in one sense, it's that I love music and I love making it, and it helps me grow as a human being to express myself artistically like that. And I enjoy it, and it puts me into a flow state and all those good things. But also a big part of it is I want to get out as much music as I can, as much quality music as I can while I'm here, to have a legacy there. And then, when I put out this poll, so I was kind of expecting it to be more legacy, less growth, but I was so pleasantly surprised by and impressed with my followers that most of them chose growth. I think it was 80-20 growth to legacy. And it really inspired me and made me think about my own actions and choices, because I recently, heard Aubrey Marcus, as you guys have mentioned him on the podcast before, talking about in one of his podcasts that he was saying that, no matter what you make or do, eventually it will be forgotten. That's just the hard reality of the matter. And so more important is to grow and enjoy the process of growing. And he said, we're spiritual beings, which I believe and agree with, and we're here to learn. We're here to learn how to become more loving and how to return more to the loving source from which we came from. And that's the purpose of all of our lives. And I truly do believe that. And not only do I believe that on an intellectual level, but also experientially, I've noticed that I'm a lot happier when I'm living my life in a way where I am consciously showing up every day in a loving way, rather than striving towards some future goal to then give myself permission to love myself once I've achieved that goal. And I've noticed that when I am doing the former, I'm a lot happier and a lot more embodied and a lot more present. And in many ways, I'm having a better impact on the world just because of the people I'm interacting with day to day, versus the latter, when sometimes I get very rigid and stuck on a goal and I become, less social and less loving and less empathetic because I'm so focused on some future goal. Not to say that having goals is unimportant, but I think I learned a lot from that poll with my followers, and it kind of made me wonder if we're going through a bit of a transition in human consciousness from 1974, when that book was written, when the general consensus was that, everything humans have done throughout history and up until this point, and will for the foreseeable future continue to do, is about striving to try to create a legacy. And while I do think that that's still a big part of our psyche and a big part of our motivation, I'm wondering if now that, because we're living in such an era of abundance and there's so much free information and people are starting to ask these bigger, deeper questions, because at a fundamental level, their Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a lot more people is met. Like, a lot more people have food and water and shelter and basic education. And so a lot more people are starting to ask these higher consciousness, higher vibration questions, and starting to maybe investigate and realize that the answer to a lot of those is just that we're here to learn and to love each other. And I really find this very powerful because it fundamentally shifts our entire orientation towards life, especially in a place like America that is so success driven and is such a capitalist country where merit is rewarded. And there's this idea of the American dream that if you work and work and work hard, then you can finally achieve happiness, the pursuit of happiness in some future time. When, from my personal experience, showing up in a loving way every day and sharing your own love and satisfaction and empathy and gratitude and compassion with the world and the people that you're around and that you surround yourself with is a lot more fulfilling and a much better way to grow as a human being than to get very rigid and just kind of solipsistically move towards your own goals. So I hope this video provides some food for thought. Like I said, I was really fascinated and very impressed by those poll results. And it's kind of made me audit my whole life and say, well, what actions of mine are motivated by growth and what are motivated by legacy? And while legacy is cool, ultimately it's an ego dream because it's about you preserving this ego of yourself. And in my opinion, it's kind of a forgetting of the fact that we are eternal spiritual beings that are going to shed this identity and body when we move on to our next phase in life, our next journey after our physical death here on earth. And that more important than whatever legacy we create for this, which is ultimately transient, is the growth of our soul. So much love, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.